Meeting is in session, sans Tony Messenger. However, he will be filling in for me tomorrow, so you'll get 3 hours of Tony Messenger tomorrow here on the Big 550 KTRS. Today, though, the board meeting is in session with John Deal, House Majority Leader. Good morning, John Deal.
Hey, good morning, McGraw.
Good to see you. Jane Duker, former Chief of Staff to Governor Holden. Jane Duker, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Update on Mama Duker, or Mama Eilerman?
Mama Eilerman is back from Reykjavik, Iceland, and she is going to have surgery on Monday here in the States. So she's recovering slowly. They think that everything will be fine. She actually had a kidney stone. And so, but I will tell you that in Iceland, she had to go to the hospital. She was hospitalized in Iceland. And she couldn't believe how wonderful the experience was. So on the ship, she was in the infirmary on her cruise ship for, 2-3 days and got a $26,000 bill for that, for IV fluids. And
how much, $26,000?
$26,000. And then went to Reykjavik and got off the ship and went to the hospital and had a procedure where they actually put a tube in her kidney. And she spent the night, got CAT scans, tests, all kinds of things. And she walked out and they handed her a bill for $1,500. So it was, it's kind of an interesting comment on medicine, and they only have
So you want to start shipping all the illegal immigrants to Reykjavik, Iceland?
Well, the healthcare is looking pretty good there. So she said it was the best medical experience she's ever had. So that's kind of interesting. But more importantly, she's going to be fine.
And more importantly, she was listening to the Big 550 KTRS.
She was, and she was able to go online and listen to us in Iceland.
How about that?
Yeah.
What a world. And Jane Duker here, and David Stokes filling in for Tony Messenger. Good morning, David Stokes.
Good morning, McGraw, and everyone else here.
We're going to start with you. You have an issue which is not typically something that gets people's ire up. However, you are upset about something.
Well, I'm actually happy about something.
Oh, okay.
Because the Institute for Justice, which is a nonprofit public interest law firm, has filed suit in Missouri. They filed suit in the federal court in St. Louis here to overturn the laws on hair braiding licensure in Missouri. This is the law that requires women who want to perform African-style hair braiding for a fee for their friends, family, customers, whomever, to obtain a cosmetology license, which involves about 1,500 hours of cosmetology training. If you go to a private school, costs, I'm told, an average of about $16,000. And here's the kicker. Nothing you learn in cosmetology school has anything to do with African-style hair braiding. None at all. Right. So
it's not even an elective course, is it?
Yeah. But the definition is so broad of what hair manipulation is that drags you into that licensing.
Hold on a second. They're making these women who do this braiding go to cosmetology school.
They're practicing without a license.
Or get through apprenticeship, which is about 3,000 hours of apprenticeship. It's even longer. You have to do it, none of which applies to what they're doing for a living. I think there's lots of abuses of licensing in Missouri and every state to be exact, but this is a particularly egregious one because rarely do you have the connection between what you learn and what you want to do be so completely zero.
Sounds almost as bad as like law school or something.
Right.
Actually, I'm not sure it's as bad as
1,500 hours, okay, is about 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for 9 months.
To go
sitting in a classroom, to learn how to cut.
Now,
to do something that you will never do.
Right.
Well, but I would like to sort of rebut the follically challenged brethren here.
Hey, just because I get my hair cut with the fingernail clippers,
right? Exactly.
You should go after it.
But for those of us who actually, the hair braiding thing is crazy, and it's also coming up with the shops where they just blow dry your hair. They're like called blowouts or whatever, and they're getting crossways with the Board of Cosmetology as well. Now, if you're doing hair color and perms and chemicals and actually hair cutting, I think you got to be licensed, and I'm okay with that. What they've done, though, is they've made the definition of what requires licensure so broad that if you basically touch hair, and get, if my daughter braids my hair and I give her 50 cents, she needs to go get a license. So I do think that's a certain amount of regulation is appropriate. Missouri has bad enough hair. We don't need to add to that problem. So I think
stop bad
hair. And there were some bills out there that said let's just deregulate, and that's atrocious.
Have you seen Jay Nixon's haircut recently?
Well,
I haven't.
But it's we don't things do not need to get worse in this. So, but I think if you're just not touching chemicals and you're braiding or you're blow drying hair, where you're not doing something that can permanently damage someone's scalp or hair, then I think they need to have a different definition for that. And so, I mean, it does expose.
Well, but that's David Stokes' point, which is you're saying they're trying to regulate these people out of business, right?
Well, it is a
they're threatening
competitive
to-
thing.
I mean,
right.
when they do it without a license, and there's no reason they should be required to have a license. Well,
They can be prosecuted.
They can be, as Jane said, absolutely. And they're operating under a risk, and the risk is ridiculous. There's no business. The state has no business I would disagree with. We agree on this particular issue of hair braiding, and I'm happy for that. I disagree that other types of it demand this type of licensure. I think there are dozens and dozens.
Have you ever
of,
had your hair colored or permed? No. You trust me. You would want somebody who has had some training.
But hold
the
on a
training
second.
But
comes from
1,500 hours?
The training doesn't come from a state license. The training comes from working and learning your craft and learning your trade and
go to
getting.
school.
You're hired, to quote Adam Smith. You continue in your trade because you satisfy your customers, not because the state says you're good at it.
You know,
if
it's
you can hurt
interesting.
if you can hurt somebody, as in burn their scalp and do permanent damage to them, I think that there's some, public safety regulation in order. I disagree that we get rid of it. I think they really need to look more closely to see if it's tailored toward the problem.
John,
This
Deere.
actually came up a couple times. Yeah, this is not unlike the lift stuff. that we're
Okay,
talking
good.
about, okay, and what you have is a system right now of licensure, which is designed by the institutional power brokers in any given industry. Okay, that try to keep out and limit competition. So there were some representatives that did try to run a bill a few years back.
The bad
I probably
hair
went
bill.
too far. It
it
probably
did.
went to bad. And but it's funny. The only person we heard from were cosmetology schools, who stand to lose the
Right.
tuition money
Sure.
that people pay to come in. So I think it's just like we talked about on Lyft. This has to be something where there have to be basic
Right.
safety, health and safety. So you need to make sure that who's ever cutting your hair is. Make sure they
Disinfecting
understand
the
and are
combs.
trained to disinfect the combs and scissors. Like you
Right.
said, make sure scalps don't get burned and
Right.
all those types of things and handling with chemicals. But when you think about what 1,500 hours is, it's 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. I think it's 9 months a year.
And you could have
Well, but you know what
9 straight months. And that's a lot of
It's
time
a-
to learn not to burn somebody's scalp.
It's a great point. I have a friend of mine who's going to nursing school, and they're going back to get their nurse practitioner's license. And the amount of things she has to go through that has nothing to do with being a nurse practitioner,
Right.
because it's 2 years and X amount of dollars and X amount of classes. It's like they just they just beef it up for the whole tuition.
Well, and where does the first year's salary go? It goes right back to the I can't imagine too many first-year cosmetologists make a whole lot more after taxes than $16,000 a year.
Yeah, it's not a lot.
And so it's also just a barrier.
But
to
you're
entry
telling me
to
that
coming in.
this is just the regulators at the cosmetology board
This is
deciding.
the Board of
Correct.
Cosmetology.
Correct.
Now, there's
Correct.
statutes.
But there are boards. There
very
are
broad
dozens
statutes.
of these boards. I
Yeah.
mean, you pick an
Dentists,
industry.
ophthalmology, optometry,
But-
healing arts.
But they're listening to the power brokers and the entrenched.
well, they sit on the board.
Sure, they do.
Doctors sit on
so
the Board
this
of
is
Healing
just
Arts.
like Lyft and just like all these
Exactly.
other ones.
Absolutely. And
This
that's
is
why
lift
it's
for
not
hair,
that
a
uncommon.
hair lift.
Licensing is always about limiting competition and erecting barriers to entry to protect existing practitioners.
No, if
in
Well,
it
whatever
should be about
industry.
safety.
It may have sometimes
Right.
some safety benefits for medical practitioners, doctors, or nurses as well. But even in those cases, they still benefit from limiting the entry. Then you get these African hair braiders, Lyft,
Right.
Uber,
test
interior
the
designers,
system.
massage
Right.
therapists, where it serves as nothing more than a strategic barrier to entry to increase.
Well, and I think
costs
lawmakers
and
need to be
profits.
more vigilant because this is the thing. When they are given regulatory authority, these boards, and these boards are made up of, most of the time, the people who are regulated, and then they add a couple citizens. Which, I mean, I don't know how, I don't think they ever, the citizens never really control the board. So, that is inherently a problem. And I think
Yeah, it's
it
like
is.
the taxi cab commission being
Right.
owned or
Right.
being run by taxi cab owners.
Right. And you have to be vigilant to say, okay, they give them broad power in legislation, and then they're supposed to come up with rules and regulations that sort of fill in the blanks. And I think it's not a bad idea for legislative oversight to say, look, this goes too far, and we're going to pull this authority from you. And, and if you're going to force us to rein you in but I think it's not a bad idea that they sort of have that hanging over their head.
That's Jane Duker. We've got John Deal and David Stokes on the board meeting. Back in a moment, Big 550.